We've had a chance to greet some folks as they came in, but just would like to say thank you to everyone who came here tonight to participate this evening in stage one of this review and renewal of the Wascana Centre Master Plan. Your voice is important in this process, and so thanks for making time to be here tonight. If I didn't get a chance to meet you when you came in, my name is Shauna. I guess I could lower this, right, instead of being on my tiptoes. My name is Shauna, and I'm one of the team members from Praxis that is hosting you this evening, alongside the planner, Dita. And we'll have an opportunity to introduce them very shortly. Members of my team are here throughout the building to take your comments, any questions that you have. So there's Erin, Sal, and Jillian that you would have seen in the building here this evening, as well as myself. And again, we'll introduce Brent and Victoria from Dita very shortly. As we begin our evening together, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered is on Treaty 4 territory and home of the Métis. We also acknowledge and honor Treaties 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 within the province of Saskatchewan. We offer our thanks to the First Nations for their care of and teaching about our earth and our relations. May we honor these traditions. The Provincial Capital Commission, my company Praxis, and the planning company Dita are committed to ensuring that public participation is part of the master planning process. Representatives from Dita will be presenting information this evening regarding Wascana Centre and the planning process. And following their presentation, we'll provide a few questions for your response and a discussion amongst the group where you can share the input that you were looking to share this evening. Our presentation this evening will be recorded, and as well, your comments and feedback will be recorded on paper and provided in a report to Wascana Centre. So our team members are here to ensure that we are doing so, and please flag us after the meeting if you would like to share anything further. Our evening tonight is scheduled until 8 o'clock, but there's still additional ways to ensure that you have a chance to share your feedback. There is an online survey, and we have the QR code here this evening. It's also found on the Wascana Centre website, so we'd encourage everyone who's here tonight to fill out the survey. We can also, if you'd like to, there's some information on folks in which you can send some written submissions on some of your feedback as well. So we can also connect you with that. I invite you to help yourself to refreshments throughout the meeting. We won't take a formal break, but please feel free if you need water or anything. We do have some at the back. And just in a housekeeping matter, if you'd like to, if you need it all, the washrooms are just through that hallway there. And if anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to flag any of our Praxis team members to make sure that you're feeling comfortable this evening. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Brent from Dita to share a little bit more about their company and share the presentation with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. And I need to get this slide working. That will help. How can I do that, Victoria? So while Victoria helps me get that up, just a little bit about myself. My name's Brent Raymond. I'm a landscape architect with DTAH out of Toronto, and my firm's been involved in the master planning of Wascana Centre since the early 1980s. And perhaps you've been involved in some of these processes before. My former and late partner, Roger Dutoy, led many of those, but I was responsible for the last master plan, and really humbled and honored to have this opportunity to do this again. Wascana is a really special place. You all know this. Not everyone in Canada does. So my first time here was 16 years ago, as I was driving across the prairies from the west and came upon this amazing landscape and resource. And this was before I actually joined DTH. So I was actually going through the center and ended up coming in here during the 2006 master plan update. There were panels on display in the lobby here. And I said, I'm going to contact that firm when I get to Toronto. And so I'm really fortunate to have the opportunity to continue this legacy in helping to guide the development and preservation of this place. So the public meeting this evening is really the first of many touch points that we'll have through the process. that the big part of this is really to introduce you to not only the process that we'll go through over the next several months, but give you a refresher about what a master plan is, what's in the 2016 master plan, and then we can start talking about ways that the master plan could evolve. So getting your input about the things that you like, you don't like, things that you would like changed and improved. So that'll be a question and answer period. And that might be just an open room type of thing. It might be, depending on the number of people who are here, we may break it up into different groups and then come back as a bit of a report back. And then we'll summarize the conversation that we have and then talk about the next steps so you understand where else within this process you can provide feedback and input. So Wascana Center is a park for the most part. We'll call it a park, but it is here because of an act of provincial legislation, initially called the Wascana Center Act, and then the Provincial Capital Commission Act that was recently updated. And within that legislation, they say there are 5 purposes of Wascana Center: the seat of government, the advancement of the cultural arts, education, conservation, and recreation. Those are the 5 uses that happen within Wascana Center. So this really helps to define what this place is. The project that we're going through here will happen in 5 stages. The first one we're just wrapping up here. This is part of informing what happens in the next, where we come back to you and have a refreshed vision and project objectives and principles for the direction moving forward. We will come to you in June with a draft master plan. Or sorry, at the end of August, early September, with the draft master plan. That'll be a touch point where you get to see, well, what is it that all of your input has helped to inform. Then we'll take that and refine the document so that we can then take it to the Board of Directors at the Provincial Capital Commission for approval by the end of the year. So as far as engagement is concerned, there are a number of different activities that will happen at different stages. So we had our first touch point the other day with the Indigenous Sharing Circle at First Nations University, which was a really wonderful and helpful conversation that we had. There is an online survey that's active and live now. This public open house is part of that. We have a series of interviews that we're having with different groups who are within the center, the partners, the city, the province, and the University of Regina, the different tenants that are within Wascana Center. And the tenant would be someone like the museum or the Connexus Center or the Science Center, as an example. All the way through the project, we'll have these multiple conversations and opportunities and different ways of receiving input. So we want to step back and talk a little bit about Wascana Center and the master plan process in the past, and then jump forward into how the master plan speaks to the future evolution of this place. So we know that Wascana started primarily around the lake, the damming of Wascana Creek so that it could help to feed livestock and then to provide water to the railroad to the north. But then it really started to become this park idea with the development of the legislative grounds in Wascana Park. And this really is an amazing landscape. It's representative of a particular style of the city beautiful and the picturesque, which was the style of that day. Wascana in the city, as we all know, is a major open space amenity. It has a number of different characters within it, and it's certainly obvious that its scale really is important for the entire region. It's not all owned by one party, even though the Provincial Capital Commission oversees the operations and the planning and the maintenance of this place. There are a number of different landowners. Now, the primary ones, as far as area concerned, are the city, the university, and the province. But there are a number of other landowners within here, including the federal government, First Nation University, and the Reserve, and Sask Power has a small ownership as well. So a little bit about the history of planning, and this is a timeline to indicate basically when these things have happened over time. The initial plan for Wascana Park by renowned and the first real landscape architect of note in all of Canada, Frederick Todd, designed Wascana Park. And then in 1913, he and Thomas Mawson collaborated on the legislative grounds. So again, it was rooted in that particular style of the day, and it's a wonderful example in all of Canada. But it wasn't until 1962 that the Wascana Centre Act was established, along with the authority, and that master plan was done by another famous international architect named Minoru Yamasaki. He also designed the first campus master plan for the University of Regina at the main campus. He was also responsible for the design of the World Trade Center in New York. He, along with landscape architect out of the United States, Thomas Church, developed the first overall master plan outside of the legislative grounds in Wascana Park. So as part of that act that was established, every 5 years, the act was to be updated to represent the latest in what was happening here and to start thinking about the future. Now, in those plans that preceded the ones that we started with, it was always just an image. It was pretty common for architects just to do an image and go, this is the master plan, build to this. But we developed the first document that someone could actually pick up and reference and read and understand what was going on. And since that time, we have done all of the master plans. There's a reason for that. This is a living document. It continues on a legacy. It builds off of what happened before. And it's a really useful document for Wascana Centre Authority and now Provincial Capital Commission to use in advancing the overall center. So instead of 5 years, we're now jumping to a 7-year cycle because things have slowed down here. That in the early days, there was a lot of change. What we're seeing now is quite incremental. Want to start talking a little bit about the center and some of the physical attributes. It all starts with Wascana Lake. It is a water body that's artificial, built on Wascana Creek, but it is what's shown in the dark blue. The lighter blue is really the floodway. So this is subject, as any water course, to expanding during seasonal and different storm events. And then there are the floodway fringes. So anything that's happening within those areas in the lighter green requires floodproofing. Irrigation is part of having a park of this size. The lighter green are the areas back in 2016 when we did this plan that pulled water from the lake. And then the darker green, primarily around Sask Poly and the University of Regina, that water was coming from municipal water sources. But of note is that after we did our plan, Wascana Centre did a irrigation master plan that revised this. So that is something that we'll be doing as part of this plan is rolling that work into the new update. Water quantity and quality is a big issue certainly in the prairies and within the lake. That the fountains and the aerators that are in the western part of Wascana Lake are really helpful in introducing oxygen into the water and helping minimize algae blooms, which really pull oxygen out and then make it difficult for other aquatic species. Obviously, it's as a big open body of water, a wonderful source for recreation. It's a highly popular place for rowing and paddling, as well as other types of watercraft, recreational watercraft like paddle boats. So again, this fits into one of the purposes, the 5 main purposes of the center. Another one of these purposes is wildlife preservation and conservation, and there is a designated migratory bird sanctuary and the waterfowl park, all happening to the east side of the Broad Street Bridge. So we have these 2 parts of the lake, recreation focused and then conservation focused. On the west side, there are a lot of land-based facilities that help to support recreation, people being able to get to the sides of the lake, access the water, being able to observe over and walking around. So those types of facilities, oh, sorry, it's on both sides of the lake here. So they're really important for people to get close to the water, which is, again, the primary attraction for many. So that's a little bit about what's out there now. As we look forward, and this was our idea of what Wascana was going to be 100 years into the future 7 years ago. So in the master plan, we identify a series of principles. And what we mean by a principle is that it's not necessarily a rule, but it grounds the plan in a way that communicates in a simple way the different components of the center that are important. So when a project comes forward, it needs to satisfy these principles. It's a way of making sure that any change that happens is doing so in a way that satisfies the plan. And I'm not going to go through all of these because there's another slide with a lot more. So just to say, there's a lot of things that people need to react to within the plan in bringing a project forward. I will go through the main components of the center and several of these principles. Now, we know that it's the seat of government. It's a place for the cultural arts. It's a place for education and recreation, as well as conservation and the environment. There are parts of the center that are specific to operations and maintenance. So the yards that staff use for the growing of plant material that's used to replace those parts that are at maturity or diseased or removed. There are also non-conforming uses like the D&D building. It was here before the beginning of Wascana Center. If that use was to change, or if D&D no longer wished to be there, then something would have to happen with that site. But you couldn't bring in another non-conforming use. There are a lot of different land uses within the center, institution, athletics, recreation, research, education. There's the urban reserve along with special features. So it's not a single place. There are a lot of different characters and uses within Wascana. And this plan helps to balance the oversight and the direction and the future development of each of these spaces. Now, we speak to the mature and the developing areas within Wascana Center. In the green, what we're saying is that these are places that are unlikely to change a great deal. But in the areas that are in gold, these are the places that we do see change happening. Now, you'll see some areas in gold within the green, like the space between the legislative building and the powerhouse, the development of that landscape, the development of the Arboretum idea, which is located here next to the nursery. Expansion of the College Street Avenue campus for educational purposes, and then ideas of the Connexus Center. In the southern part, a lot of what you see there is related to the expansion at some point in time of the University of Regina, whether it's in student housing, family housing, development on their main campus. The large area that you see to the east of the Ring Road is for expansion at some point in time. Now, within these different areas, there's different landscape character. We speak to the romantic or the formal landscape is what we tend to find around the Legislative Building and Wascana Park. But the prairie landscape is one that is of vital importance. This you will find mostly from the south, moving in towards the Albert Street Bridge or the Broad Street Bridge. And that is a really powerful combination of different landscape design and landscape ecologies. Connected to that are different levels of management and maintenance. So when we have these formal areas, it takes a lot of energy to maintain them. The mowing of grass, the planting of ornamental species, it takes a lot of water and pesticide and pest control to maintain that, because this is not a native landscape to Saskatchewan. So it takes a lot of energy to keep that. This is something that you find in England. The medium level are more of these open parks where you have trees and grass, but not a lot of the other ornamental garden species. And then within an established prairie landscape or wetland, they're low, they're self-sustaining. They don't require the same energy or resources to maintain that type of landscape. There's guidance within the master plan that speaks directly to understory management. And this is really about maintaining views of important points within the center. So we all know about the views toward the legislative building, but there are also these windows in, and we call them windows or views from different points, whether it's trails or roads or other important points within parks, where you can see the lake, you can see the ledge, you can see other important things on the other side. So making sure that beneath the canopy of trees, that there are places that you can see through. And it doesn't mean take all the understory away. Sometimes it's just removing a few shrubs to make that happen. We also speak to in the master plan about the different types of buildings. And there are really two types. The pavilion buildings, those are ones that you can view from all sides. It's really hard to tell the front from the back. Examples of those would include First Nation University, the Legislative Building, the Connexus Center. But then there are other buildings that we refer to as more urban, have a defined front and back. So the servicing is in the back, the front is the front door. We find a lot of those around the university campus and Innovation Place. Now, heritage as it's defined within the master plan up to this point has been about built resources and landscape resources. Now, they're designated structures and landscapes within Wascana, specifically around the legislative building. But then there are other areas of interest that need to go through a formal process to define their value as a built or cultural resource. Now, this is an area that is growing in complexity, and we're redefining what heritage means. And this is happening throughout master planning processes around the country. So we anticipate some evolution and change to this particular part of the plan. We speak to the roads that go through Wascana, given that it's within the city of Regina. There are a lot of municipal streets or city-owned streets that go through and create boundaries and the edges to Wascana Center. We have the Ring Road and the Trans-Canada Highway. Now, and then all the streets that are coming to the center and terminating there. There's also these series of scenic drives that were developed. And this, again, goes all the way back to the original plan for Wascana Park. These scenic drives were meant as attractive, uncongested, slow-moving places for viewing the park and enjoying it, not as cut-through traffic. It's when these were originally put into the plan, and the cars would only go maybe 10 or 20K, not 70 as you often experience when you're in different parts. So these are an important part of the overall park experience. We're in the prairies. It's cold. Parking, the big issue. We talk about that. There are a number of surface parking areas within Wascana Center. There are only 2 below-grade structured parking. We know that when there are massive events here, this becomes a big issue. So parking management is something that is talked about in the plan as well. There's an extensive trail system that is out there now. And we know certainly even when we were doing the plan before the pandemic, there were a lot of issues about conflicts because so many people are wanting to use them. And that was increasingly the case through the pandemic. The number of pedestrians and cyclists in particular who were using this place to recreate. Now, the plan includes a lot of proposed expansion of the trail network throughout Wascana. So these are things that you see in the dashed lines that can get introduced over time. In the plan before, we were talking about information systems, but since we did the 2016 project, Wascana has now developed their new wayfinding and signage system, which is starting to get implemented around the center. And the University of Regina has a new system as well, which is quite lovely. So those are really wonderful additions to help people know where they are within Wascana. The plan also speaks to commemorations, so monuments, memorials, and it also speaks to public art. Now, given the legislative grounds are here, there was a lot of interest from people around Saskatchewan for putting monuments close to the grounds. So the plan helps in defining where those spaces are and that are best suited for introducing those. Public art is different. Public art can take many different forms. It can be permanent, it can be temporary, it can be an installation, it can be fixed or kinetic. There are a lot of different ways. So the public art can contribute. There are, this is a little bit looser about where it fits within, because if it's a fixed item, it might have need a place that's a little more permanent. But if it's something that's temporary and can move about, then there's more flexibility. There is guidance around building heights. Now, the easy way to think about this is that the tallest building within Wascana around the lake, this is when it was first developed, should remain the legislative building, and that any new building that's brought into the center shouldn't exceed 13 meters in height, which is roughly the same height as a mature canopy tree within the center. So there are a number of points around Wascana that we've identified as important viewpoints in which you can see the legislative building. Now, there are parts of Wascana way down by the university where it's a different story. You can't really see the ledge building from there. But when we're in and around the lake, this is a tool to help define the maximum height of buildings towards the ledge. Universal access is a big deal as well. We want to make sure that people of all ages and abilities can appreciate and enjoy the center. And this also speaks to planning for all seasons. Winter's a long one here. So this shouldn't be a place that excludes people for a large part of the year. How do we make sure that we're enjoying it for 12 months? The plan isn't just about talking about the design components. It's also a useful tool to help the Provincial Capital Commission, the public, proponents bringing projects forward. And I'll define what a project is. A project could be a building, it could be a landscape, it could be a recreational facility. Anything that happens within the center is a project. And it needs to meet certain expectations. There are expectations around the use. So does it respond to context? Does it fit one of the 5 purposes? There are urban design expectations. So how does it respond, again, to its broader context? How is it organized on a site? How are you designing the building if there's one? How are you dealing with the landscape? How are you responding to climate? This is an increasingly important aspect of master plans, is dealing with sustainability and resilience. And then if it is a building, then there's a whole other list of things that have to be considered. So I wanted to go through and just demonstrate, and it's in a little bit more detail to give you more information about the maps that are out on in the lobby. And one way that we organize the document is to talk about different planning areas. So there's several within Wascana. Again, it's not all one place, but it is helpful to break it down so that we can speak to it in greater detail. So the first one is called the South of College area. This is roughly the area between College to the north, Albert on the west, Broad on the east, and then the lake. And this includes the Sask Museum, the College Avenue campus, the Wascana Pool, the CBC building, the sound stage. So this is the demonstration plan. Now, the demonstration plan is a tool we use to show Wascana in the present, but also suggest what could happen in the future. Now, what you'll see here are two different colors of buildings. We have the purplish buildings like the CBC and the College Avenue campus buildings of U of R. You see the museum and the Connexus building. But what you see in white are projects that are either proposed, like the pool, which is under construction, and that'll turn to purple when we do this update because it will likely be open and operational by the summer. But we indicate that if new buildings are going to happen, how they should happen to meet the objectives of the master plan. And there's some rules about this, making sure that there's maintaining this open line and central green for the College Avenue campus, for example, and using new buildings to help shape that. There are no proposals for that to happen. It's just to say that if new buildings do come forward in the future, they should arrange in a certain way. So as we go through this, it's a similar idea. Just to note that at the museum, they've had discussions about potential expansion over a long period of time. We're indicating that if they are to grow, they should grow in a particular way, not into the park along the College Avenue side, but more along a certain axis to maintain that opening of Wascana Park. This is a three-dimensional digital model of the plan. And just to note this, what it indicates is that outside of the College Avenue campus, all of the buildings happening within that are within that 13-meter height. So suggesting that no new building or existing building is above the height of the mature canopy. The next planning area is the Wascana Headland. That's where we are now. It includes this building and the Bar Willow, the marina. Not a lot of change was anticipated when we did the plan in 2016. We don't imagine that there's a lot of change anticipated in this plan as well. So you can see where we are in this building right here and the Willow Restaurant. The legislative grounds are the next planning area. And I'm sure you can guess what's in here, but the legislative grounds, the Douglas building, the government buildings that are along the Albert Street part of the center, the rehabilitation center. But there were some proposals last time that came forward during our discussion. One was the moving of the Floral Conservatory to Wascana Center. Now, they didn't have a defined plan, but we wanted to give them a place within here. So there's the development of what we're calling Nursery Park or the Arboretum, where the Floral Conservatory would have a home. So if they do come to the center, this is an area that we suggested they're best suited. What you also see around the Douglas building is the extension of these buildings on either side of it. You'll also see some smaller buildings being introduced, particularly here on the south side of the legislative building. There was a suggestion at that time that there might be a project for a conservatory that would open up towards the south lawn, going between the ledge and the powerhouse to really create a stronger landscape connection to that part of the center. And again, just showing the existing and the proposed projects. The next one is the Connexus Arts. Now, Connexus has had interest in expanding their operations at some point. No formal proposals, but again, we're showing if they are to develop, where they should develop, and what are the things that they need to consider in the work if they bring a project forward. So maintaining that, that relationship of buildings to Lakeside. And again, these are just placeholders, so it's not really a proposal. The next planning area is Family Parkland. So over in the area north of the eastern part of the lake, around the Science Center and Family Parkland. And again, there were no exterior changes that were being proposed at that time. So we've, for the most part, carried forward the ideas that came from the 2006 plan. Douglas Park, when we were here last time in 2015, 2016, the football field had just opened. So that was a new addition to the Douglas Park complex. But again, a fairly light touch in this area. There were some overlooks and observation structures that were included, as well as a small support building for Libel Field. And this is the second to the last of these planning areas, the University Precinct. This is as it existed in our last aerial photograph of this territory. The University Precinct includes Innovation Place to the south, as well as First Nation University. And part of, you start to see the potential expansion of the university when needed east of the Ring Road into that expansion campus. That's been on the books since the late 80s, early 90s. So it's really there when the university needs to do something. What we're also showing here is the long-term plan for the university, as well as First Nation University campus. So you'll see this is FNU in its existing condition, but the master plan by Douglas Cardinal, the internationally renowned Indigenous Canadian artist or architect, in developing it further. So that's I'm always so taken and impressed by that complex. It's unlike anything else in the country. So really a very different place than what you get to experience out there today. And again, just showing the digital model of that. And the last planning area I'll talk about is Wascana East, which includes really the area around the expansion lands for U of R, and what happens around Sask Poly. So thinking of that becoming more of a campus and making that connection between the two. And then just showing that in model. So another important aspect of Wascana Center is the place it sits within this urban and rural context. Again, as part of this broader greenway system or green space system, there is a continuity of circulation that happens outside of its boundaries to connect with other trail and pathway systems in the city. There are visibility from outside and within Wascana Center to development that's on the outside. So those are things that are within the city's official plan as being an important input to any types of projects that happen out there. There are upstream conditions that are of importance because they do influence what's happening within the center. So talking about conservation, maybe extending the limit of the reserve of the Wascana Creek Conservation Reserve into that land. Now, around implementation, the document does provide guidance for how you use it. And this is really important for everyone to appreciate. So implementing this plan, again, within the Act, in the legislation, it says that every 7 years, there's an update. So this will renew it, keep it relevant, keep it as a living document. The alignment of the master plan is really important as well, so that it keeps getting updated to reflect anything that's changed over the last 7 years. So any proposals that have happened, any policy changes that have happened at the provincial level, those are all part of it. Another aspect of implementation is that projects go before an appointed architectural advisory committee. So there's a peer review of every project comes forward, whether it's a park or a recreational facility or a building or a land use. It's reviewed by this separate body to ensure that it's consistent with the direction of the master plan. So this helps to provide consistency and oversight. There are a number of different things that someone has to do in making a proposal. You need to state your intent. What is it that you're wanting to do? Then if you can make it past that stage, then you can go into designing a concept. If you can make it past that stage, then you can move into further refined levels of design detail. So there are a lot of different checkpoints to make sure that whatever is happening is consistent with the master plan.